So, before I continue the story, because this is where it starts to get good and in different ways, um, someone posted a long time ago that I wonder what my son or our children will think about us when they go back and look at our posts from years prior. And so when I tell this story, I always think of Bryson and my future, and those that I'm speaking of. And so I do. I think of everything that I do, trying to do in the best conscious, which is why sometimes it's really hard to talk about, because it's not only uncomfortable for me, but because it might not be the most comfortable for other people, but it's still my story and it's who I am. And as I've said before, written on paper or not, sometimes lives can look messy, but that's where God shines through, and everyone has messy. So I think the last I left off, I had just finished working at a hospital. I was finishing working at a hospital, and I had a patient who was brain injury, and I worked with the boss, and she was a firm eye, and she was a previous brain injury survivor as well. And I really was not happy after that patient. It hit too close to home, and I just couldn't. And I had really been pushing towards going back and getting my master's or going back to school to go into nursing, and I wasn't allowed, and I was really unhappy. And so I left that job, and I started working multiple jobs at the same time because I had left a job and I had to get another job, and I was looking for jobs. And so I put my resume out, and I put it towards staffing agencies, and was working at Starbucks and babysitting and waitressing at Chili's all at the same time, and had just moved to 103 Crestwood Lane in Spring Hill, Tennessee, without knowing that that was my previous address from when I was a little girl. And so with all of that, I ended up getting a job as just a secretary, and it was just a temporary job while I found something else that I was interested in. And I started working for Bell Construction. And at this time, I was really unhappy with my weight and with myself. I was probably, at that time, I was a size about 14. But when it comes to just my body structure and everything, I was just not. And I think that I'm going to speak for women. I think we as women, when we're overweight, we know we're overweight, and we just become miserable in ourselves. And it's just not a very comfortable position. And there were so many things that I couldn't put my finger on, and trying to fill that void. And that's as close as I can explain it. I wasn't going to church anywhere. I had been looking at churches by myself, and I had stopped looking at churches, and I just grew tired of doing everything on my own. And so I just kind of kept trying to find what filled me. And I had started working with a personal trainer. And as I said before, that personal trainer really hit home when he said, "Don't you know you're too pretty to be this big?" No one had ever said that before. And so it just really struck a chord with me, and I just really started working hard. And then I had gone to a friend's wedding, and I had crossed the beach, and I ran into a friend's dad, and he said, "Jennifer, I didn't even recognize you. I thought, who is that girl across the way?" And I got another compliment, and it just never hit me that I was that big. And so I started working on myself, and then I started to lose a lot of weight and started to really eat well and just feel better about myself and more confident. I was a secretary at an office, which was Bell Construction. They're now Bell and Associates. They've built the Batman building, among other things in the Nashville area or Tennessee area. But I was working on myself and starting to really become stronger in a different avenue. And this is about when MySpace came out. And so sitting at my desk all day, I had a lot of free time, and I would get a job done and completely, and then I would have plenty of time, so I would just sit at the desk and just kind of occupy myself. And so that's just what my job was. It's not a big deal, and I was looking for other jobs while I was working at that job. And out of nowhere, I was sleeping one morning, and I woke up from a dream. And I sat straight out of bed laughing. It was the most real dream I've ever had in my life. And I woke up just laughing. And it was an uncontrollable laugh. And I vaguely just said what the dream was about, and that was it. And I got on MySpace, and I found Josh Holmes. And I said, I had a dream about you last night. And he said, you did? What was it about? And I didn't want to tell him everything it was about, because it was so personal, and it was it was the most real dream. And to this day, I can tell you exactly what it was. And I just said, I woke up and you were sitting there and we were talking. And I gave him some of the details. And I didn't give him everything, but it was a dream. And in that dream, he had asked me, and what I didn't tell him is that in that dream, he had asked me, he had told me he loved me and asked me to marry him. And it was so real, and I had woken up laughing because it was such a happy dream. And so we just kind of kept communicating lightly. And then I got a new job. And I left that job and I went to the next one, and it was for IT, and I was a software trainer. And Josh had asked me if I was wanting to become pregnant, and I said no. And that was the truth. Because I had heard God tell me to no, not to. And I had spoken out, and I'd said, hey, no, I don't want to, it's not time to get pregnant right now. And so I went to the new job, and I was working really hard. And then I got to talking to my friend Jessica, and she said, hey, you won't believe who's pregnant. And I remember laughing, and I go, I wonder, And so I was headed to the gym to go and work with the new personal trainer, because I hadn't worked with one in about a month, because I had gained a little bit of weight back. And I went to Walgreens, and I took a pregnancy test. And I sat on the toilet, and I started crying because I found out I was pregnant. And I had lied to Josh, and I had disobeyed what God had asked. It didn't mean that I wasn't happy, because I never want Bryson to think that he was never wanted. But so I went to the gym. I went and talked to the personal trainer and said I was pregnant, and she said, well, I don't think we should work out right now. And then I went home, to 103 Crestwood Lane and sat on a chair. And when Mitch Morrison walked in, I told him, and he sat and he didn't speak to me for about an hour and a half. And I stood up and I said, I'm hungry. I'm going to go eat. And he sat there for about 30 more minutes and didn't speak to me. So, that was how Bryson was introduced to me, on a Walgreens toilet. But never one day would I ever regret that Bryson Andrew was mine. And truth is, that was the last time I got to speak to Josh for a long time. And it was really hard because I had thought I had lied to him, and that just means God didn't stop. He didn't stop reminding me.